Welcome back to another episode of The Unreal Podcast. In its first, only, and in my absolutely unqualified opinion, best podcast on internet fiction and culture, transgressive literature, and everything on 4chan that's actually good. And today, we got something pretty good for you. We've got Ogden Nesmer from 4chan, the guy with all the banner ads about the book called Eggplant. He's joining us for interview. So, welcome, Ogden. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I am Ogden Nesmer, and I am an author. I don't know. You already did a good intro for me, so you said it.
Well, thank you. And as always, I am LAbuschagne, author, sorority, vigilante, and I get up to kind of a few other things too. You can read my books on Amazon. Currently there's 2. Inshallah there will be more. And as always, I'm joined by alcohol, specifically policeman coffee, which is what you call black coffee after you dump a few shots of brandy. But back in the old regime of South Africa, if you were a member of the SAP, you could walk into any cafe right off the street, they give you one of these for free. I'm very glad we've reformed the police service somewhat. Anyway, this episode is not about the police service. Ogden.
No. I appreciate, though, the drink trivia. I always like that, the start. I think that's a good, Also, that's a really good fact about South African police.
Yeah, I always do the episode starting with a bit of drink trivia. I am a notorious alcoholic and, well, for a brief time, a professional bartender. So I know my way around hooch.
Nice. It's too early for me on my end, though. I'm just going to have coffee. No brandy, just coffee.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. So I think I want to get started with a question that is on everyone's minds. So, okay, I've read the book. I even reread bits of it and copied down some of it to steal for my own writing. But I did not find a single mention of a vegetable. Why is the book called Eggplant then?
That's fair enough. That's a good question. But there are some things I can't really explain so directly like that. I've heard a lot of good interpretations, though. Most people actually go the phallic route. I don't know why I wasn't thinking about the emoji, eggplant meaning dick.
Right.
I can say that wasn't on my mind when I was coming up with the title. But I do like some of the interpretations that I've heard, where people think that it is somehow representative of a penis.
Fair enough. Though, I mean, to be honest, I think I was probably the only other chronically unblind person who did not think that.
Sure.
Because, I mean, the book definitely touches on themes of sexuality. I won't deny that, but I never thought it's a real cock and balls kind of book. No. I was just completely lost. I thought it was like, at some point, your main villain was going to brandish an eggplant, an aubergine. I was going to say, oh shit, it makes sense. He's the eggplant man.
That could have been the perfect punchline. Maybe that should have happened. When I wrote a first draft of the book that was very, very different, and really not good. And the title was one of the things that was a carryover. So,
right.
In a lot of ways, again, like there are some things I was thinking, but in a lot of ways, there's no big reveal for that specifically. And, the book isn't really about that, but it's a lot about kind of, I don't know, boredom and seeing the same thing over and over again and not being impressed and being misled and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of, I guess you could say like, kind of like integrated obscurity in it, but that's also a really good cop out too. And I can act like, there's a lot going on when really it's just kind of, flim flam, or is it, it's, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that approach. You did touch very heavily on like ennui and a search for a real meaningful purpose in life, and something you can to borrow a phrase from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or triangle of Mac, as I like to dub it, self-actualization. And I thought the motif of the ring and circles, both that which the Sam tracks around the island, but also then how it's brought up again on the second island. I thought that was such a clean way of showing it. How do you break a circle?
Yeah, it's kind of I didn't want to get too corny, but I don't know. There's a big. You can look at it one way as a circle and see it's a single continuous loop. It's very inclusive and oneness and what implies. But as I think you're touching on in later when Sam is having his kind of breakdown. It's about how isolating it is, how you basically follow this loop and you're just going over the same path again and again and again and again, and you're completely alone, stuck on that path. So,
Yes.
So yeah, and it means it takes on a different thing for Arda in the art world, which is supposed to be like a very decidedly forward-moving thing. It's kind of a subtle horrible realization that there is no moving forward. We're just constantly on an endless feedback loop, patting ourselves on the back.
Definitely.
Yeah, but that's kind of just extrapolating.
No, I find it very interesting as somebody who's rubbed shoulders with the art world once or twice. I found that characterization of it to be very cuttingly accurate. I think especially it really more applies to new art, not like postmodern or modern art, but the circles of people emerging into it.
Yeah,
Do you have experience in that field? I've got to ask.
No, no. I kind of, if anything, I'm a lot like the main character, like Arda, who who really wishes she could do that. But in general, I'm always just really fascinated by people who are creative. Kind of just going off what you had mentioned. The modern, modern, not capital M, but just kind of like the general present day art world in any venue. It's that anxiety. I think it's what Harold Bloom called anxiety of influence, or maybe it's anxiety of. So it's just so much has already been done, and when you look back, you can feel this kind of resentment on 4chan. But basically, there is that sense in any modern art scene where it's just people are desperate to do something new, even if it means nothing, and then even then, is it really that new? It's strange. It's strange.
It certainly is. And I think you can definitely see this in 4chan, as you said. And I guess with any sphere of creativity, is like, as people involved in that scene, mainstays on /lit, you really do see so much of the commentary and the discussion people have is either aping the classics or complaining that things don't ape the classics enough.
Yeah. And it's tricky because I can empathize with that very much. I can relate to that. But, at the end of the day, we can read these books from the classics. We can really appreciate, their much more refined sense of language and cohesive thoughts. But it's like, we really don't know that world. I mean, it's trite to say that world is gone, but it's like, ultimately that world has very little to do with us here and now. I know we're kind of talking the other side about how things stay the same forever and forever, but in reality, things are actually, moving forward. So it's sometimes you have to just, I don't know, not suppress those feelings, but channel them into something productive. I mean, on 4chan, on Lit, everyone, I think, has that resentment almost before they have the creative aspect to want to create something new. They have a resentment for how things are just kind of stagnant.
Yeah, and compulsively shitting somebody down before they've even opened their mouths.
It's a totally reasonable place to start. It's definitely the place that I've started from with a lot of my projects, but that alone is not it's not going to lead you to be productive in any sense. It's just going to lead you to well, here comes the freaking punchline, to walk around in a circle, right, and to just chase your own tail. So so yeah, that's I don't know, I forget how we started, but talking about fortune.
Yeah. I think that's a real piece of wisdom, is you can't constantly compare yourself to others. Jono is something else that's, pretty trite first grade slogans, but I think
Yeah.
it's especially true as a creative when there is such intense pressure to compare yourself to others.
Yeah.
Because if you compare yourself to yourself only, and I think there's an equally dangerous risk in that, something that's not really talked about enough. You end up like Sam from the book. You're stuck and you have no way to break the circle because there's no outside influence, there's no progress, there's no community.
And this is moving on to something maybe we could talk about next, but there are flaws in Eggplant. I'm aware. And that's not to say that I half-assed it and I threw it out, but to me, I was very, very afraid the whole time of that constant cycle of perfecting that happens to so many people in the end. I'm a very firm believer in a moderately acceptable book is better than a book that doesn't exist. So,
strongly agree.
Yeah. So in that sense too, the productive energy, it's not about constantly not looking back and stuff like that. It is about literally just sometimes, putting pens or typing things out. Producing.
Yeah, you got to put 3 feet on the gas pedal here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on, just putting yourself out there. And I think that's one of the things that people don't really understand the power of in self-publishing, is that while it might not necessarily be as lucrative as trad publishing, and granted, if you don't have great backing or advertising, trad publishing isn't exactly fantastic either. Who goes into a bookstore and just pages through new releases? Right. Not enough people to maybe put food on the table. But yeah, I think self-publishing as an excuse, or not even an excuse, as the way to show your work and introduce people to yourself as an artist. I think there's a lot of value in that, definitely.
Yeah, I agree very much. It's like in all other artistic industries, I know it's a little late to talk about like the advent of the internet and stuff like that, but that really has still completely shattered these industries. And I think in some ways, other things have shattered the literary industry because, like you said, people just don't go to the bookstore and just flip through the pages of random books. It's not, they don't treat, that the way that they would treat movies, or, where you could watch a filmmaker's quick minute video on YouTube and
yes,
be familiar with their work in a minute and have a judgment call on it. You can't do the same with books. So I think things move a lot slower. But I think that, honestly, we're on the verge of like, I don't want to be too dramatic and say like the death of the industry, but there really is no reason for it's already happening with specifically genre fiction. There's no reason that for kind of general, I guess if you want to, be hoity-toity and call it literary fiction, there's no reason that can't find a sufficient audience. So I'm, hopeful. I'm going to keep pushing, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a good plan in there. So I think while people might be, pessimistic about fiction, I think trad publishing is going to get hit the hardest. I've done a minimal amount of research on this, which basically translates to talking to people who I think know what they're talking about. And one thing I at least picked up as somebody who's attempted to get a book traditionally published, and after F. Gardner showed me it was possible, and you were later proof, I went the self-publishing route. Trad publishing gets brutal competition just from piracy, and as well, every other piece of media out there. And I think also free fiction. Because, while the stuff in Royal Road isn't necessarily going to be mind-blowing, it's free. And if you want to read things, I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a lot more entertaining, at least myself, than actually hoofing it down to the bookstore or paying money for it on Kindle.
And you know what's, I mean, the free angle it's big for me. I mean, okay, let me just say, I would love to make money, but I'm comfortable not making money. That's how I feel about the actual money making aspect. But in terms of, like, do people want to read these kind of things? Like, Royal Road is one thing where it's, people who like a very specific, like, fantasy genre, they like it. Like, they will seek it out, and, good for them. That's a great, deal they've got going. But in terms of just spurring the random person's interests, trying to get them interested based on the fact that, they're just a human being, that's different. And, I don't know. I mean, sometimes people are very resistant on lit. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
People are very, very, almost stuck up sometimes. They don't, maybe it's because they're sick of seeing shills. But I don't know. So, I've had people tell me straight up, informally, not in my face, but tell me that, like, I would never read something that was not traditionally published. And so a lot of people will even go farther and say, I won't read something that was published, after 1940 or something like that. So
it's this air of general pretentiousness. I think the issue is a lot of this, when you do have at least like the slightest amount of, academic backing or like prestige associated with it. Granted, there's a lot of shit books written before 1940, but like we all have this cultural conception of, oh, literature was good. Everyone listened to classical music. Like people wore formal clothing. It was classy. Obviously, the books are good. And so I think then it lets people, to a very large extent, disguise their personal taste, which is more or less valid in most cases, for some actual qualified opinion.
Yes.
Despite the fact that there has been good fiction since, it just isn't like what was written before.
And it's funny, I mean, just in terms of lit specifically, there's so much, like, insecurity, and people are afraid to like things on lit, expose their tastes, and be made fun of. But if you go to the fitness board, I mean, you would think that they were more avid readers because, like, okay, so go to Fit and you go to a Fit humor thread. 9 out of 10 posts are screen caps of, like, long green text stories. And obviously, this is not like high literature, but this is like people who want to read, and they want to read, this kind of shit. It's not, I wouldn't call it like mundane. It's just, that's real life.
Yeah, there's an audience for things you can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think people on lit kind of just need to give each other a break and stop calling each other suits all the time, and just kind of enjoy, I mean, liking something that's just enjoyable, something that they don't have to flaunt and act, like they're impressive for liking. Just liking something genuinely.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. And I mean, you can see a similar thing on some of the other boards. I think the greatest example is against, like, all odds, MLP. Because their people read and they write. Yes, they read and write MLP fan fiction, which, despite getting close, has never actually been good. But they produce more content. You find more writers on a board to a dead show than you do on literature.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know what that says. Like, because in one sense, I'm not, I'm giving off very easygoing vibes, but in one sense, like, I do want a little bit of respect. I would like people to see me as a writer, not just as some guy who makes stories for himself. But at the same end, I want to have that kind of, gripping effect that I can put my book in the hands of anybody and say, you're going to like this.
Yes.
It's
like the same thing.
Trying to make those ends meet is tricky, but I guess that's the whole project, really.
Yeah. and I think it also then, depends on how somebody sees this, because I speak under correction here, but you said your goal with writing Eggplant wasn't to make money. Obviously, money is nice. Money turns into coffee and alcohol, but it's a side hustle.
Right. It's yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe it's worth disclosing that like I have a job outside of this, so it's not like I'm frivolous and I don't know the value of a dollar. It's just kind of, it's really more just about I'm willing to put forward a good faith, presentation and just show people that like, yes, what I truly genuinely want is for you to just read it and have an opinion.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think, to anyone directly who is thinking about self-publishing, I would recommend it because if nothing else, it's incredibly liberating to not be concerned about bad reviews anymore. I mean, obviously you can get someone who tells you, this is garbage and you should kill yourself for making it, but that's,
Yes.
whatever, that happens. But, having someone who actually parses through your words and still has something, critical to say, really not that bad. It's actually kind of nice when you've done the work for them to give something to, chew on and critique. So I don't know. I think it's
mutual.
It's fulfilling. It's fulfilling on its face.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like, obviously nobody likes being called a chop with no talent.
Yeah, sure.
But if somebody's actually gone to the trouble of reading your book, firstly, okay, mission accomplished. Even better if they actually paid for it. And if they give criticism, hell, who knows? It might actually be good.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's... No, go ahead.
Well, just like I had said, I know Eggplant isn't perfect. The flaws in it, I'm aware. It's because people have pointed them out to me. And it is what it is. It's good to make progress. It's good to keep moving forward.
Really, it is. And on that note, firstly, I'm going to mention circles since I think there's going to be the theme of it. I'm going to put a circle as like the picture. But the second one is the banner ads. Then doesn't that run kind of opposite to your whole ethos here? Because if you're not maybe looking to making a profit, why are you putting so much money, or at least an amount of money, into advertising?
Sure. Well, it is so full. I guess full disclosure. I have been kind of experimenting with ads to see what's the best strategy for anyone who's not familiar. Because I actually have, when people were emailing me for copies, I had a lot of people ask me just straightforward, how does advertising work? Basically, you put in an amount of money to the system, and you can choose how it's distributed over what time period, etc. But it'll take your money, break it down, and make micro bids of a couple cents a piece. Excuse me, I burped. For impressions, which are showing up on someone's 4chan page, and then it'll tell you if someone clicks it. So initially, I had kind of set aside a bit of money, and I was trying to see how I could increase presence, whatever, have people recognize the ads, kind of just seeing reception. Now I'm at a pretty good rate where if I'm advertising, it's like 20 cents a day. It's really a minimal presence.
Right.
But the other thing in terms of just making money is I can guarantee you, for anyone who is thinking about advertising on 4chan to sell their book, there is no correlation between sales and ads, unless for some reason you've got a different product. If you're selling a book, people are not, with no other reason, they're not clicking on your ad and buying your book the next step. You have to get the word out.
Yes, I found the same thing. Because I also ran a couple ad campaigns for my book, Buy It, Sociopath. But I did notice that. You got clicks, and I made my money's back on the ad campaign. But I really found that most of the profit of this comes from shilling, which, the Johnnies get kind of kind of touchy about. Yeah, with the ads, I think the only person who's really like the ad success story here is Gardner, and that was just because he was the innovator.
That's true. He is basically the innovator. He's the forerunner. He's the one who is, for better or for worse, has, stepped out into this territory. And, I've talked to Frank informally on Discord and stuff. He's a nice guy, and more importantly, he's genuine. Like, he actually does want, people to read and like his book. But his method is it's got its flaws. People don't always respond positively to it. And so for me, I would like to emulate a lot of his success, but refine it such that I can avoid any negative reception, obviously, but, cater it, I guess. There are people who have responded to seeing cover of my book negative on 4chan. They've responded to it negatively, and there are people who've responded with genuine interest. So it's, you just have to kind of play it right. And the other thing about filling, the janitors obviously are gonna ban you, which they've got me. I am banned as we speak. But the users, the Anons on 4chan, are gonna hate you probably even more. I mean, a lot of these guys just, they hate that kind of money-making mentality.
Yeah, 4chan, for better or worse, is crabs in a bucket.
Yeah, it's not like all what's the thing, public attention. Not all attention is good attention on 4chan.
Yeah.
So you have to curate it, and honestly, again, the best thing for that for me has been giving out copies free on email, because a lot of the people who emailed me, they're very upfront and they're very nice, and they're interested in their own projects too. But when they read it and they like it, they have no problem telling someone else, like, this is really good. So I'd recommend that for anyone to give away at least a chunk of your book for people to read.
Yeah, something I'll look into again. I think it really then builds a reading list, because you have people, you have their contact details, they're already invested, and they can tell other people. And so I think it's also then a good ties, because like, if you're doing sales, hey, they might buy the next book on discount, or they might just pay full price for it. I think there's definitely a lot of untapped potential in doing things like reading lists, especially if you're self-pubbing, because it creates that target market that you wouldn't otherwise have, then that traditional publishing would have advertising to do. You have word of mouth, and you have word of mouth of people in the community you're trying to sell to already.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this is getting a little bit like nebulous, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but when you look at the trad pub angle, it's a lot about analyzing the market base. Like, I'm sure people listening, maybe they were familiar with that whole American Dirt book that it was basically, before it was even published, they streamlined it to have some Amazon TV show based off of it. It was about Mexican immigrants. But then right before publishing, someone outed the author as not Mexican enough, something like that.
Yes. It was Gringo.
Right, and so it's this big fiasco. And so, to me, what I take from that is, the trad pub angle of analyzing market bases. People don't like to be analyzed a lot of times.
There's a risk to it.
They might be abrasive and unfriendly, but I think ultimately they're a lot more receptive to being approached, and having a conversation. I mean, my book, a lot of it is about taking hallucinogens and stuff, which a lot of 4chan guys are not into taking drugs. I've had a lot of people who completely just, once I tell them what the book is about, reject it. And it's that is, again, it's one of those things that sucks, but it's like, they will still hold a conversation with me, and they will still actually honestly consider it for a second before rejecting it, but they're not turned off. They're not, offended. They don't get this kind of like, at least in my experience, that's not what ticks people off, is when your book is not about the right thing for them. What ticks people off is when you treat them like a unit to make money off of.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's like there's a difference between not being interested and being actively turned away. So, I mean, if you're turned away, then you're not going to tell your friend who is interested to read the book either. Though, granted, reading Eggplant, obviously I think narcotics were a theme of it, but I didn't feel like they were like the major thing. Like, if I had to describe the book, I'd say it's mystery. It's about the art world and decadence. Obviously, drugs don't play a part in that, but I wouldn't say it's like a central theme or crux of the book.
Sure, it is I guess motif or theme. I actually don't remember from English class, but it's definitely a part of the book. But it's not, and it's also not favorable. I mean, the character who's taking drugs is essentially, no spoilers, but he's basically trying to, completely wipe his mind and like not exist in reality anymore. So it's not, it's definitely not advice for people to take drugs.
Yeah, it's like you did not glamorize it, and that's one thing I enjoyed about the book, is you depicted everything very uncompromisingly. Like, you showed it for what it was, or at least what it could plausibly be. Because, I've never been to a private island filled with like BDSM priests and murderers myself. On the bucket list,
Yeah, and it's, a lot of the things, like I mentioned, I had a first draft and it had a lot of the topics and themes that made it into the final draft, but it was just very didactic and very just, unobscured. It was very straightforward. It was clear what everything meant, and it was just not good. It was just not good. So, in some ways, it's not about being, it's not like, if for drugs specifically, it's not about making like the after school special of like, here's what happens to Timmy when he takes too many drugs. It's about trying to convey adequately the the fear encapsulated in potential of what could happen, what's likely to happen. But that's you could say that about anything. That's not particular to my book.
True. But one thing that I do want to know about the book, and it's something a few others have asked around as well, and I know this might be spoilers, but with the main villain of the book, the serial murderer artist and pseudo-intellectual, I'd say, is he the same person as the stranger that Sam encounters earlier in the story?
So I don't know how to approach this because I also don't want to spoil, but I guess it's not really a spoiler. So when I wrote that, I did not intend them to be the same character. When they were in the first draft, the stranger was actually he was kind of like a caricature of typical like Russian kind of like clandestine like weirdo that you see in a lot of like American action movies.
I got that vibe.
Yeah, and that's just kind of corny, so I couldn't completely remove. I didn't want to completely remove him, but it worked a lot better when he is the stranger, and his presence is even questionable. So I didn't write them as the same person. However, what's so funny is that so many people took away that they were, without even being instructed or looking at that. Most people had told me, I didn't understand what Goshen was doing on the island, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. So, I don't know if that shows that I'm a hack and that kind of just happened, but the way I'm going to stick to it is that that's just a great thing about, writing in a way where you're trying to convey potential. because these dots just kind of connected, and I've gone back over it, and I've kind of like, I see what people are talking about. To me, I guess the short answer to your question is no, they're not the same person. So to me, it's like there are some things that I can't, I'm more like, how did you miss this and this? But
Right.
but I don't know. It is very interesting that, if nothing else, that they kind of just have the same presence. I don't know. Maybe
I
that's
wouldn't
not
say
interesting.
the presence. I felt them to full different roles. It's just, yeah, again, I got a lot of that edgy Eastern European lunatic from The Stranger, and I thought, hey,
Sure.
we already have an edgy Eastern European lunatic in the story.
Yeah,
What would be
I
the
mean,
odds that Polynesia has two of them?
that's the thing, is I should probably just tell people, yes, they are the same, because that's the best. That's the best point. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's again, I keep referring to this first draft that doesn't exist, but like, it was just wacky and kind of full of these corny tropes and stereotypes and stuff, and so a lot of that does carry over. Um, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I can still see a level of like wacky adventurousness in the book, but it's a lot more sober, and especially with the consequences of the actions. And the real, sense of danger and mystery, I think, is executed very well. Maybe not paced as well, but there's not, the actual book episode. That one's still coming out. This is more about the book. And so I wanted to know, with like the other villains, what is the inspiration there? Because I found Lynn to be such a unique take on an antagonist.
Yeah, it's weird because the book doesn't really stay too long in LA. It's really kind of just the first, maybe the second chapter, that make kind of direct depictions and commentaries on that kind of, everyone understands that kind of like frivolous Southern California,
Yeah.
showiness lifestyle. So in that sense, he's kind of, he's easy to grasp in that sense. But he's, I don't know. I mean, he's another one of those who, and I think I kind of said that at one point in the book, or phrased it a different way, where, the biggest, most important aspects of him are the parts where he's not in the scene. It's kind of, if I can just reveal a little joke, it's, in the second chapter, he's sleeping while she has the big conversation that like sets her on her way. So literally, he's there in the corner, a presence, but not saying or doing anything. So that's kind of, just his setup. Is he's like a lot of characters in the book. He's a presence on the outskirts kind of thing.
Yeah, the edge of the circle.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any too direct influences. I don't think, because no, I don't. I wouldn't say there's any too many. There's no complete direct influence for Lynn as a character. Just kind of the, stereotype or trope presence of this kind of like tacky, superfluous yuppie who is actually very sinister and murderous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the standard LA twink with money, except he's been upgraded from bratty to actually deadly.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I found that to be quite a fun take on the characters. Is that, like you said, they have influence when they're not in the scene, and that's, I think, something I wanted to touch on, because it's something I'll definitely want to incorporate into my own writing. But I think it's just great advice in general. Is it gives the characters impact when you can see their effect on the world without their direct involvement. It makes it feel like the world is a tangible place rather than just a set of scenes.
Yeah, and it's tricky because it maybe implicitly goes up against what I think is another good rule, which is show, don't tell. um, you always want to be. It's tricky because there are a lot of points in Eggplant where I just explain things. If it's not didactic, it's very explanatory, and it kind of
Yes.
there are parts where it elaborates on a philosophy or something like that, which sucks because I'm about to say you shouldn't do that. It's not even just that you shouldn't do that, but it's just you want you want what you're reading to be the meat of the thing you're trying to convey. You don't want to have to, I don't know, break it down. You want someone to be there experiencing it. So in that sense, for characters who have an impact from outside, and in some points in Eggplant, I did not just do it appropriately. There are points where she literally is just asking, like, what is that other character doing? Are they waiting for me on that? And that's too direct. You shouldn't be that direct. But I think there are other points where it, like, okay, Sam, his character, I know that there's one, or actually maybe later there's another, but basically in the intro of his character, there's one line about his dad having left him a book of how to code.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so with nothing else but that statement, it implies at least that his dad is absent, that his dad's, and all the things incumbent in that. Perhaps he was a drunk. Perhaps he was a
Yeah.
drug user, because we know Sam goes on to use drugs, right? So it's, it's about implication, and it's about, finding ways to say things without saying them, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also a fine line between mentioning stuff or giving things the attention that they do in the story. He got a coding textbook. That is implications. You don't need like a whole scene of the father giving him the book and saying, "This will be useful one day, child."
Exactly.
Yeah, I did find that the exposition was one of the weaker parts in the story, especially since the shit that was going down was so radical. It's like Coachella on LSD. That a more direct involvement in it, or having this viewpoint character move into it and engage with it more thoroughly, I think was a bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and it's, like I've said, and I have no problem telling anybody, it's kind of hard to go back and read the book again for me personally, because it's like, I've gone over it, I went over it a lot before publishing it, but having to, try and get the word out, I still have to go over it again. And now it's almost more crushing because it's like I can't go in and tweak those, modify those. And when I acknowledge the problem, I have to just kind of sit with it. So it's but of course, taking it to the next project, I mean, one thing I can say is one just specific pointed thing is like, after my one takeaway I'd say is brevity is great, being concise and just say, and again, it's another thing that comes up against, you don't want to be too explanatory, too upfront. You want to be mysterious. So being, brevity might be tricky to handle, but it's you have to balance those. You have to be concise and not waste time, but you can't reveal your secrets right at the beginning.
I do think so. Yeah, and a maxim that I borrowed from college papers, which I'm still trying to get the handle on myself, is a short bad book is better than a long bad book, and a short good book is great because it means you can read two in a sitting. So I think there's definitely something to be said for brevity.
And also, just like what you said, just short books. There's this book called House of the Singing Caryatids by Victor Pelevin. And
yes,
I would hesitate to say it was like the inspiration for Eggplant, but it is a short book. I think it's only a little more than 100 pages. And even more than being short, at least the edition that I got was like small. It was pocket sized. And, I picked up this book in a store, never having heard of it, just like the cover. It was great. It was one of the best books I ever read, and I read it in a couple hours. And to me, I was just like, this is the experience I want to try to recreate. Just this nice, compact. For some reason, I had this dream of Eggplant being literally a book you could stick in your pocket, something like a vademecum or whatever the Latin is.
Like an actual eggplant.
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, as a complete side note, I can say I'm very, very proud of the cover of the book because I didn't design it. I had a really talented designer do it, and so I know that like the physical copy of Eggplant looks just how I want it to look, and it looks great, and I'm really proud of that too. So yeah, that's just another, I guess books as art objects themselves is another angle of the self-publishing, really, not to go back to our initial rant, but it's like that's another aspect to take it from because, people, it's another thing that people are sick of being analyzed by. I mean, how many threads on Lit do you see where people are like, look at these shitty mass market covers, like, fuck, where's the innovation? Like, someone innovate. So
yeah, it's like if it's striking, at least somebody's going to pick it up and look at it. That's already a step ahead from a competition.
Yep. It's the most traditional, simple angle to approaching cover design, but it's like there is so much muck in terms of other ways where it like the mass market cover designs, they're so meant to look good on a bookshelf, but they look kind of weird in your hand, in my opinion. I don't know, that's different, but it's all part of the project.
Yeah, it's very much more on, I think, the publishing side of literature, which is a real unseen player in the business. But if you're self-publishing, we have to get handles on these kind of things to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's your job and you should take it seriously, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd strongly agree with that. And one last thing I really wanted to ask, mostly because it's posted on the actual thread, and I just want to see like your reaction to it or what you'll say. Fashion. Are you a fashion guy?
No, I am not, unfortunately. I'm wearing dirty sweatpants right now and a shirt with a nice stain on it. Disgusting looking stain. So no, I'm not a fashion guy, but I'm not a fashion guy. If we were doing a video chat right now, I think maybe the punchline would be landing, but like I'm definitely kind of a roll out of bed and wear whatever is there kind of guy.
Right. That's totally fair. I'm somebody very into fashion myself, and I just find it interesting because I think it's also a sphere of art that needs to be again treated like art you can wear. Like a book is a piece of art, the cover that you can carry around, that you can display. So I always ask about it, at least.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, even though I am not fashion conscious, I'm definitely big into the idea of, art in different mediums and being at its best when it speaks to the strengths of those mediums. I guess now we're kind of extrapolating a little broader on the fashion question, but
yes.
But it's like, to me, a painting. What makes a painting good is not what makes a book good. And
yes, definitely.
In one sense, that's fucking obvious. But like, really, you should try. The most common problem, I think, for self-publishing particularly, is people who write their book like a movie.
Yeah, it's not a script.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think people want to read just back and forth dialogue for like pages broken up by just scene setting stuff. That works well in a movie, but people want something else when they read. I think.
Yeah, but, I'd agree. I mean, obviously we'll have exceptions, but it's like, as you said, play to the strengths of your media. And if you want dialogue and minimal scene setting, write a play. who knows? Somebody might even, stand up and act it out for you.
Mm.
But books have, I think, a more cerebral aspect to it. And even if you're not writing the next Finnegan's Wake here, actually being able to engage on that angle, I think, is an opportunity that should at least be considered.
Yeah, I think, and the thing too is, for movies in particular, which, a lot of
Well, that's
people
at
are.
least my one.
No, I agree. I mean, sorry, I don't know if there's a fire engine in the background. If you want me to wait till that leaves or if you can even hear it, but I think it's leaving. Fuck, no, it's not. What were we talking about? We were just talking about.
I know, we're just tying up discussion in fashion. So I think, that's the last
I
question
had
because we're a
something.
little. So, if there's anything
So
you'd like to say, go ahead.
yeah, sorry. I'm much better in text because I don't forget things. I always forget things when I talk. But no, I was gonna say something like about oh shit, I totally forget. Oh, about why books are good. Okay, all I was gonna say is that for people who come over from watching a lot of movies to wanting to write, it's tricky because movies are an inherently perspective-based narrative where someone else had said this. I read this in a book. I'm not that smart, but because of just the very fact that everything you see in a movie comes from the camera's lens, it has to convey a perspective. It has to persuade you of a certain either moral argument or just general like theoretical argument. But
Yes,
what
yes.
what I think is so cool about books is you really, if you're talented, you're doing it sophisticated, you really don't have to. You can be perspectiveless. You can, really, really, really dig into the obscurity and mystery aspect. I mean, to me, it's like I think I'm not an avid horror either movie or book reader. Like I will read or watch. I don't have a big backlog of favorites. But to me, horror in writing is like it's almost like easy. It's almost like it's that's what the genre is for. This kind of just like conveying in a sense of the audience, like, wait, you didn't tell me enough. Like, what does this mean? That's I don't know. That's just a great thing that you can only do with writing, I guess, or at least in my limited opinion or expertise. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I had some other good nuggets, good sound bites, but
Yeah, well, from my side, again, thanks for coming on, Ogden Nesmer. It's definitely been great to have you here and actually, get into the meat of self-publishing and learn a little more about Eggplant from the mind who cooked it up and then tormented it with its banner ads. But before I let you go, one last thing, and this time it's the last thing, I promise. What is the deal with the cuttlefish?
okay, that actually it might not be a like revelation to the story, but it is. So basically, the device going on there. We talked about the circles and the endless kind of trap of the circle, but you're made to see how the cuttlefish has his pupils, which in most animals would be circles. They're actually sine waves. They're a
Right.
perpetually moving kind of up and down. The general gist of the cuttlefish is kind of just that. Like a lot of things, it's something that seems to in the book. A lot of things, it seems to exist kind of outside. It's a very otherworldly, strange thing that the characters don't really understand and they don't really talk about very often. But when it comes up, it's kind of clear that it's on their minds. And ultimately, it's just kind of the juxtaposition of, Sam becomes destroyed by this vision of the circle that, is ever present in everything and haunting him and just reminding him of all the things that make him miserable. And the cuttlefish is somehow
Right.
living outside of the circle as conveyed by its pupils. and other things.
I
But, you
see.
know, that's people got to read it to get the other things that are, you know.
No, well,
Or
thank you for that explanation. That was one thing I was just banging my head against in the book. Is like, why is it immortal? What does it do? And you've somebody's going to listen to this and then say, "Oh shit, that's what the cuttlefish meant." Really glad I wasn't the only guy who just didn't get that. I hope that guy exists, or else I'm going to look kind of dumb.
I hope that someone comments and says, you know, no, that's absolutely not what it means. It means this. And, you know, honestly, as long as they can make a good argument from the text, they might be right. And I'll have to concede that I had no idea what was going on when I was writing my book.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. From the Unreal Press's Corner, again, thanks for coming on, man. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
You're more than welcome. And, you know, as always, I've been LAbuschagne. My drink has been Policeman Coffee. And I've been talking to Ogden Nesmer. Until next time, everyone. Cheers.
I may have gone too far in a few places.